So week one waiver wire additions. So I know some people out there are thinking, hey, didn't hear from you Monday, what's going on? I challenge you to critically think, how is it possible to review and watch the tape on all these games by Monday and have a video posted midday Monday? That's the biggest thing I have a gripe about, is that there's waiver wire videos coming out on Monday, and there's no way in God's name, unless you have multiple people on a channel or a social media platform reviewing games, that you could have viable stuff coming out on a Monday. So that's why crunch tape Sunday night, crunch tape Monday all day, and today you get the waiver wire additions that I actually do like based on the tape and a little bit of the stats as well. So hopping right into it, at the QB position, I have a handful of guys that I liked watching and I liked reviewing the tape for them. So number one is Justin Herbert. If Herbert and Harbaugh want to play like this every single week, Justin Herbert is going to be a must start in 12-man, 10-man, and 8-man leagues. I don't know if in week one, this is Jim Harbaugh being like, hey, it's the Chiefs. We're going to come out hot. We're going to come out throwing. We're not going to lose this game. We're going to punch him in the mouth. We're going to keep punching throughout the game. If that's all that was, and Herbert kind of, relegates himself a little bit less in the passing game, and it's a little bit more of a balanced offense, like a truly balanced offense, then this could be a little bit of an overreaction. But if this is kind of what we saw at the end of last season, going into the playoffs, and this is what we're going to see throughout the rest of this season in 2025/2026, with the addition of Keenan Allen, with QJ looking like he can actually catch the football, oh my gosh. We have three viable receivers on this team. If Amari and Hampton can, come along throughout the season, more than likely, if this is what it's going to look like, it's a top 5 scoring offense. And if it is going to be slightly relegated, a top 10 scoring offense is pretty realistic as well. If you're in a 12-man league, 10-man league, 8-man league, and you went really late on quarterback, Justin Herbert might be a great stash on the bench, because if in week 2 against the Raiders, he goes out there and throws 30 some times for 300 yards and is running all over the place, then this is going to be what we're going to see out of the Chargers, and this is going to be an electric offense, and you're going to want to have Justin Herbert and probably one of these pass catchers on your team moving forward. So the next QB is Justin Fields. So when it comes to Justin Fields, when I watched the game initially, I was like, okay, a lot of check downs, a lot of easy stuff. He's running the ball. That's great. It's nothing too crazy. The numbers are good, but I gotta go back and watch. So I went back, I watched it, and I was like, okay, some of these really truly are 1-read, 2-read options, for him in the passing game, but he is throwing the ball with conviction. The man is out there slinging it, gunning it into tight windows. He's getting it all over the field to different wide receivers. He is focusing and, highlighting Garrett Wilson, which is great because he is the best receiver, obviously, on the Jets football team. Justin Fields looked great in week 1. My hope is that with the buy-in from Aaron Glenn, and I talked about this going into the season, if Aaron Glenn bought into Justin Fields, told him, hey, it's here, or you just run or throw it away, and Justin Fields could actually step up a little bit in the passing game and make some of those harder throws, he could be a viable fantasy quarterback in fantasy football. If you went later on QB, he's definitely a great bench stash. The biggest thing about week 1, and I hope everybody knows this from the other videos I've done, so I'm sorry I didn't touch on this earlier, do not overreact to people underperforming or overperforming in week 1, because you're going to hear all over social media and YouTube, the sky's falling if this guy or these guys didn't do well, and these guys are the best players of all time in the NFL if they did do well, or these are the guys you have to add. For me, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert are two quarterbacks that I think are worth adding on your bench. Seeing how week 2 goes, if Justin Fields looks the same, he's going to be smashing fantasy football. If Justin Herbert looks the same and they're going to run the same type of offense and the same pass dominant, and Justin Herbert's going to run the ball a lot, you are going to be set up where both of these guys are going to be great fantasy options going forward throughout the rest of the season. My last QB, and this is more for a Superflex, which is what I talked about before the season started, is Michael Penix Jr. So in regular 12-man, 10-man, 8-man leagues, probably not somebody you need to pick up right now. But if you were in a Superflex format, Michael Penix is going to very likely be a good option for you if you did not get another good second QB on your football team. With Drake London going down, a little bit of a concern, but I can only imagine how much more efficient and better the Falcons offense would have been if we would have had Drake London on this side, Darnell Mooney, the field stretcher, on this side, and Kyle Pitts somewhere here in the middle. This team would have been a 3-headed monster in the passing attack, and it would have been absolutely disgusting. I think you're going to see Michael Penix throwing the ball all over the field. He does have the ability to rush if he needs to, which obviously we saw in this game with the rushing touchdown. In a regular 12-10, 8-man format, single QB, not somebody you need to pick up. But in a Superflex, I think he is definitely worth a bench stash to see how we look as the season goes along, especially in week 2. And once Drake London and Darnell Mooney are both on the field and he looks the same, or at least Drake London's back out there from his shoulder injury and he looks the same, he is somebody who's going to be very, very viable for you in a Superflex format. Now, when it comes to the running back position, I mean, I have 3 guys for you, but all 3 of them, I'm like, what you gonna do? So the first guy for me is Dylan Sampson. He was very involved in the passing game. The Browns' run offense and like their push from the offensive line when they were running the football for both him and Jerome Ford did not look that great, but he was very involved in the pass game. Joe Flacco is a true NFL veteran. He's going to check the ball down when there's no other options available deeper down the field. The biggest question for Dylan Sampson is what's going to happen when Quinshon Judkins actually starts playing. Quinshon Judkins is going to be more of like the in-between the tackles guy. Is Dylan Sampson and him going to share 50-50 splits? We just don't really know, but it's possible that Sampson is somebody you can plug and play the first few weeks before Judkins comes back. Again, he's not somebody that I think you absolutely have to have, but if you are very, very, very weak at the running back position, I think he's worth at least a bench stash for you. Because there is potential where Judkins, we just don't know what he's going to look like in the actual NFL. And if Sampson and him are really splitting the backfield and he has the pass catching role, then he may be the guy that you want to have for this Browns offense because the run game and the push up front did not look that great. So again, more of a bench stash kind of guy at the running back position. So the next RB is another bench stash. It is going to be Trey Benson. With Trey Benson, it was nice to see him actually getting some work out there on the field. He did start some series for the Cardinals as well, so I did like to see that. He's not going to be somebody you're going to be starting right now, but he is a true handcuff that you're going to want in fantasy football because he was actually getting the usage out there this year in the first game of the season. If James Conner does go down, Trey Benson is going to obviously immediately step in and take the probably 75% of the workload to 80% of the workload in the backfield for the Cardinals. Has the potential to end up being like a viable starting RB in fantasy football if given the opportunity where James Conner does miss games or considerable chunks of the season. Now for the next RB that I'm going to talk about, he's overly rostered in the majority of leagues out there. So if he's probably going to be rostered in your league. But watching the tape on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, he looked really good. He looked very explosive as the game went along. He was getting more and more touches. I'm assuming that in week 2, he's going to get a bigger share of the touches. He might not be as involved in the passing game, but I think you're going to see Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt on more snaps in week 2. He's going to get more touches in week 2 than week 1 because in week 1, I believe he proved himself. He is going to be on a top 10 scoring offense. He will eventually get worked more and more into the passing game as well. He will be somebody that you're going to want to pick up now, stash on your bench, see how he does in week 2, see what the workload is like in week 2. And if he's out there in your league, I would definitely pick him up, put him on your bench, just like these other running backs, and stash them to see what happens in week 2. So at the wide receiver position, the 3 guys that I'm going to name first are all pretty straightforward. You have Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen, and Hollywood Brown. For QJ and Keenan Allen, if Justin Herbert, like I said earlier, is going to play like that, and that is how we're going to see Jim Harbaugh run this offense, it's going to be a little bit more pass dominant, and there's this many targets on the field. Both QJ and Keenan Allen, in my opinion, are very, very viable in fantasy football. If QJ can actually catch the ball like he did in week 1 and consistently be open like he was in week 1, he is going to be an absolute smash play in fantasy football and a great pickup. It really comes down to, was this a boom bust kind of week like what we saw last year from QJ, or is this going to be the role he's going to have in the offense, and can he catch the ball consistently? When it comes to Keenan Allen, he's going to be the 3rd option for this football team through the passing game. I think he's kind of like the safety blanket for Justin Herbert. I think his volume and targets are going to be very, very similar week to week to week. He may not be as much of a boom player as QJ can be because obviously QJ's younger, more explosive. But if Keenan Allen's going to be the safety blanket for Justin Herbert, he is going to be a viable option for you in fantasy football going throughout the rest of the season. When it comes to Hollywood Brown, it's like, who's Patrick Mahomes going to throw the ball to? Obviously, the guy had 16 targets, which is absolutely insane. I don't think that volume is going to last into week 2 because obviously he's got to get the ball spread around to other people. But if Xavier Worthy is going to miss significant amounts of time, we're going to be waiting on Rashee Rice until I think like week 7 because they have a bye week at like week 5, I believe, or week 6, something like that. You're going to have a guy in Hollywood Brown who's going to be the primary target earner for the Chiefs offense. There's a reality where he's a viable wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for these next handful of weeks. So he might be somebody you can pick up now, play right now if you're needing somebody to fill in for you at the wide receiver spot up until the point in time that either Xavier Worthy comes back or Rashee Rice comes back onto the field. So the next guy for me is going to be Kayshon Boutte from the New England Patriots. He dominated targets for this Patriots team in week 1. He looked pretty decent out there on the field. He was getting open. He had some decent amount of separation on the routes that he was running. The biggest question mark, though, for Booty is number 1, is he really that guy? Because I did not really feel like that was the case coming into the season. Number 2, first game for Stefon Diggs coming onto the field off of that injury. I'm anticipating that we see more targets for Stefon Diggs going into week 2. But if this is going to be more of a wide receiver 1A and 1B situation, and Booty looks a little bit more explosive in week 2, he's definitely somebody who's going to be viable in fantasy as more as a wide receiver 3. But if Diggs does come in week 2 and takes over the majority of targets in the receiving game, then unfortunately Booty kind of goes by the wayside unless there's an injury to Stefon Diggs or his performance starts to fall off later in the season. It's kind of one of those, like, again, stash on your bench, see how it looks in week 2, see if Diggs is getting more targets. If he is, Booty's probably not the guy. If it looks like it did in week 1, in week 2, then Kayshon Boutte is definitely going to be somebody that you're going to want to have on your fantasy football team going into the rest of the season. The next wide receiver for me is going to be Cedric Tillman. He looked pretty good in week 1. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy is more than likely going to continue to be the wide receiver 1 on this football team for the Browns with Joe Flacco at the QB spot. I think you're going to end up seeing, though, Cedric Tillman is going to emerge more and more, and it's going to be more of a 1A to a 1B, kind of what we were starting to see flashes of last season when Jameis was running this offense. I think there's a reality where Joe Flacco has a pretty long leash with Kevin Stefanski. I think there's a reality where Joe Flacco ends up starting the vast majority of the season. If that's the case, then you're going to see Cedric Tillman being a very viable option for you. I think he's definitely worth a bench stash. See how it looks in week 2, and then you have the ability to plug and play him as needed if he's going to still be, more of that 1B option to Jerry Jeudy as the weeks go along. The next 3 guys are more of like, if you're in a really deep league, if you're in a 12-man, maybe a 10-man, you're really weak at wide receiver, or again, it's a very deep league with very deep benches. These are 3 guys that I think are worth either stashing or just kind of monitoring going into week 2. The first guy's going to be Calvin Austin for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He looks like he's got the speed, looks like he has the juice. Heard some stuff coming out of camp that Aaron Rodgers really liked him, that he was really high on him. He could very easily be the wide receiver 2, like solidified for the Pittsburgh Steelers football team. It really comes down to the usage. How much are they going to pass the ball for the Steelers? How many games are they going to be in that kind of game script where they have to push the ball down the field like they were in week 1? But if they find themselves in situations where they have to push the ball down the field, if he does end up solidifying himself as the wide receiver 2 in week 2, then he's going to be someone who's viable as more of a flex bye-week fill-in as we go later into the season. So the next guy out there, the wide receiver position that I talked a little bit about going into the season as a PPR scam, and he kind of showed up as a PPR scam in week 1, was Wan'Dale Robinson. The biggest thing for Wan'Dale, he's not a big yards after the catch guy, but he does not drop the ball very much when he gets targeted. If we can get off of Russell Wilson, we get to Jackson Dart as a starting quarterback, he could be a viable like flex fill-in for you as we get later into the season, especially if when Jackson Dart does take over, this passing game elevates and Wan'Dale Robinson actually gets a few more targets, and they're a little bit more quality targets than what we saw in week 1. The last guy who's maybe a deep league bench stash or somebody we just got to monitor going into week 2 is going to be Joshua Palmer for the Buffalo Bills. He did have a decent amount of targets in week 1. He looked pretty decent in week 1. It was a pass-heavy game for Josh Allen where they were needing to score a lot of points. So that gives me a little bit of pause, and that is the reason why, again, I talked about him going into the season, but I don't know if this is just Joshua Palmer looking good because they needed to pass the ball a lot, or is this Joshua Palmer potentially being the 1B option to either Khalil Shakir or Keon Coleman as the season goes along. For all 3 of these guys, again, they're more of a deep league stash, or they are somebody to monitor going into week 2. Next for me is going to be the tight end position. There wasn't a lot of talent popping off the screen at the tight end position in week 1. Harold Fannin from the Browns, though, watching the game the first time live, I was like, oh, okay, like, this guy's really involved. I don't really know Harold Fannin, but okay, like, he looks okay. When I went back and watched the game again, I'm like, oh my good God, this dude is insane. He's motioning, he's lining up in the slot, he's lining up in 3 wide receiver bunch sets, he's carrying the ball one time, like a direct snap, like the Wildcat formation. The guy looks like he is going to be the tight end 1 for the Browns, which we know that Joe Flacco, when he played, 2 years ago for the Browns, loved targeting David Njoku. If Harold Fannin is going to be used like this and be all over the field and be a primary target catcher for Joe Flacco, he could be an absolute smash pickup in week 1 for the waiver wire at the tight end position. There was a couple of different times where he was open and Joe Flacco did not see him. And there was one route into the end zone where Joe Flacco saw him just a little too late and had to throw it over his head out of bounds because there was no more space for him to run along the sideline. There's a reality where Harold Fannin could end up being this weird hybrid player like a Tyler Warren, Brock Bowers, moved all over the field, playing as a slot tight end, and he ends up being somebody who could end up being, I don't even know, a tight end 1 in fantasy football if we see the same usage in week 2. I'm not saying he's somebody that you need to pick up and start, but if you do not have one of the dominant tight ends in fantasy football, meaning Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, or George Kittle once he comes back from his injury, he is very likely going to be somebody, if the usage and targets stay the same in week 2, kind of solidified as a tight end 1 in fantasy football going forward. So I would definitely say he's worth a pickup and at least stashing on your bench to see what it looks like in week 2. Next for me is Juwan Johnson. I'm not a huge fan of the talent. Last year when I watched the Saints towards the end of the season, he was one of the only target earners that was left on the field. There's a reality where until this offense for the Saints gets rolling, that Juwan Johnson might just be the safety blanket option for Spencer Rattler. I'm not saying he's somebody you want to start. I'm not even saying he's necessarily someone you need to pick up, but maybe if you're in a really deep league or you have a really weak tight end for your team, he might be somebody who's worth stashing. If in week 2 the Saints offense isn't starting to click a little bit more and he's still getting a decent amount of targets, he may be somebody who's viable going into week 3. But again, not a fan of the talent, not a fan of the tape. But when it comes to the tight end position, if you're getting the targets, you're getting the points. So it's kind of one of those things, especially in a PPR format, that he might be a viable tight end depending on the usage in week 2 and might be worth the bench stash for you, especially in 12-man leagues. The last tight end that I want to mention, and again, this is somebody I talked about going into the beginning of the season, as he will be a tight end 1 this year. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. It is none other than Zach Ertz. He will end up being the over-the-middle safety blanket. He will be a red zone target earner. It's going to be a top 10 scoring offense for the Commanders. Him and Jaden Daniels have a really good connection. He dropped a couple of the balls out there that were thrown to him. If he had caught those, he would have had even more points in week 1. And then everybody out there in the world will be talking about how Zach Ertz is somebody you got to pick up. He's somebody who's not going to be the tight end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but he could end up being the tight end 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Again, I know we're looking for players who have the upside to be the best. But if you're needing somebody in a deeper league, a 12-man league, maybe even a 10-man league, I think there's a real reality where Zach Ertz is a viable tight end option for you, especially as we get later into the season and there's potential injuries at the wide receiver spots for the Commanders. All right, so there are my waiver wire pickups for QB, running back, wide receiver, and the tight end positions. If you're in a league that uses DST, defensive special teams, I will have a video that comes out tomorrow about my favorite streaming options in week 2. Facts versus feelings video out tomorrow as well. I'll be breaking down each and every single game, my actual thoughts and notes from not just watching the games once, probably not just watching the games twice. By the end of the day, I probably will have watched every game or almost every game 3 times and kind of give you my breakdown and analysis of week 1 and give you some of my projections for week 2 as far as who I think are going to be good matchups, who are going to be people that you're going to want to be starting before I get into my actual rankings and tiers later on in the week. Hopefully this video helps you get just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. Hopefully I'll see you guys again. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. And until then, y'all have a blessed day. Bye.